Welcome to Renewed and Radiant Podcast. This is where we have the real and raw conversations. So if you're ready to rise into the woman you were created to be, you're in the right place. And together we can design a life you love. Okay, today I have with me Krystina Dixon. She is an ordained chaplain, an author, a Christian life and legacy coach, and the founder of Breathe Life Coaching. With a master's in counseling and triple board certifications in biblical counseling, Christian life coaching, and Christian mental health, Krystina blends professional insight with scripture-led discernment. This is going to be an amazing conversation. Thank you for being here today, Krystina.
Thank you for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity to glorify God.
Yeah, I know you have an interesting story, Krystina. I'm all about the real and raw conversation because that's where we're all actually living, right? Not in the highlight reel. So,
Absolutely.
what got you to where you are today with all the things you're doing now?
The grace of God is the short answer. I grew up, and I always put this disclaimer out there. I don't ever want to disparage or dishonor any people that were involved in my life, because if it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't have had this journey that gets to be my testimony. But I did grow up in a pretty traumatic childhood. There is something called childhood ACEs, which is basically adverse childhood experiences, and there are 10 of them. Typically, the higher number someone has on that scale, the more chaotic their life is, the more trauma there is, that kind of thing. And I have all 10. So the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you today is a miracle in and of itself. I've had several near-death experiences. It really is just such a blessing for me to be able to share this story. I did grow up in a traumatic childhood. I did spend some time homeless. There was alcohol and drugs and prostitution in the environment that I grew up in. And I had to learn very, very quickly how to survive and how to read people, how to become a chameleon so that I could stay safe. So naturally, that led into my adult relationships that were toxic. Some were abusive. The same patterns were being repeated. It's kind of like I gravitated to the same person. They just looked different. They were in a different body. As I was coming up and I was doing my best to keep everybody happy, keep the peace, people please, try to be perfect, I found myself always in a state of fear. I didn't realize it was fear until I was in what is now my third marriage, and I'm not proud of that, but you wanted raw and real.
Yes, tell us.
I'm proud of my marriage, but I'm not proud of the 2 divorces that came before it. There was a lot involved with that we don't have time to go into. It's a whole nother story. I found myself standing in my kitchen one day. I had this epiphany that I always wanted to help people. And I had started down this path of being a counselor. I worked for a nonprofit that I really loved and planned on dying at. Ended up, I say I got poached. The reality is they made me a really great offer and I took it. Prayerfully, was convinced that's where God wanted me. 2 months later, they lost their funding and I lost my job. No big deal. My husband was the breadwinner, and so I wasn't really overly concerned. But as I was standing in the kitchen that day and I was telling him, hey, lost my job, he just kind of smiled and nodded and said, well, I lost my job today too.
Oh,
yeah. So in that moment, that was the moment where time stopped for me and God met me in that kitchen. And it's almost like he showed me a highlight reel of my life. And when we think highlights, we tend to think like the best moments, but it was actually his highlight reel. It was all the times that I was so scared and I was so desperate that I was letting fear dictate my behavior, dictate my decisions, dictate my personality. And he said, I was there, and I was there, and I was there, and I was there. And fear not, because I'm here. And it was kind of like this, like the best way I can describe is in the movies when time stops and everything just slows down and like the whole world just pauses and you go through this. Reality, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, I don't know, wasn't that long. But as I came kind of back to myself in that moment, when God kind of snapped me back out of this fearful place of going back to being this child and being homeless and scared and hungry and afraid and just all of the things that came with that I was sure was what was going to happen now. My husband and I looked at each other, and at the same time we said, well, I guess God's going to show up in a big way. And the fact that we both said it, it both landed on our hearts in exactly the same way at exactly the same time. We just started laughing. Like I'm like crying and laughing at the same time because there was no other option. I mean, we had no plan. So in that moment, that's when I realized the grip that fear had on my life. And that was when I knew that my coaching and counseling needed to go to women who are living their lives in fear, who have become enslaved to fear. A lot of things we don't recognize as fear, and they become our idols. And we actually worship at an altar of fear. We know that the Bible says perfect love casts out fear. So we know what the antidote is. But it's a whole lot more complicated than just, let go and let God or pray it away kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what I focus on is the real human experience of what I call the breathe journey. We inhale peace, we exhale purpose. But how do we do that? We have to know how to trust, surrender, and obey. We can't obey if we can't surrender. And how do you surrender if you don't trust? Most of the women I've talked to in my life, professionally and personally, I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations I'm like, well, I got trust issues. Mm. Yeah, we all do. So in order to really understand the impact of what that moment meant to me, one of the things I'll take you back to, we're going to go backwards in time a little bit, is the part of my testimony that I kept hidden. When I started doing podcasts and started doing videos and things like that, and I skipped over a part of my life that I think your audience, your women might benefit from. Because there was a lot of shame attached to it. So about 6 years ago now, I was married, got married my third marriage. I got baptized the day before we got married. And I wasn't raised in a Christian home, but I kind of always knew who God was. And I have stories that go around that where God was really there with me in moments and was my invisible friend. So that's why I say I think I was chosen. I didn't choose him. But I hadn't really publicly declared any kind of alliance or allegiance to God. I went to high school in a Muslim country, so it certainly wasn't encouraged there. I hid it. In my relationships, I hid it. I would pray, but it was never part of our everyday relationships. So I got baptized. Everything was great for the first week. I was living high on life. Everything was perfect. Look at me. I'm this baby Jesus junkie. It was all really great. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, I was reading the Bible and it was Moses and God having this conversation. And I was like, man, I wish God would talk to me like that. I wish he would be so direct and be like, hey, move from here and go there and do this. That would be awesome. And then he told me to move. And it was okay. I was fine with that. I didn't really care for where I was living. So I was all excited about this brand new life, new husband, new identity, really. My assumption was that my children were going to go with me. My daughter had just turned 18 and she was kind of working on moving out. So, okay, that was kind of expected. But my son was about 12, 13 at the time. And I just assumed he would go with me. And my world completely fell apart when it became very clear that that was not an option.
Okay.
So I wrestled with God. I remember being wrapped up in a quilt that the people that were our wedding guests had signed with all kinds of prayers and well wishes. And I had my Bible and I was on the floor, just guttural cries. I mean, ugly cry, snot bubbles, all the ugly stuff. And just crying out to God, like, why? Because all I ever wanted my whole life was to be a good mom. Mm. That was my whole purpose, I thought, in life was to be a good mom. I wasn't going to be the kind of mom I was going to redeem my story. We all know that, like, we're not the redeemer, right? Like, that's his job, not ours. But I was still learning that. So I remember crying out to him and I'm like, why my babies? Why my babies? And he kept saying, whose babies? Whose babies? So finally I realized, oh, okay, they're your babies. They're your babies. Okay, fine. But how could you leave them in a house that isn't a Christian household? Like, here I am, this Jesus junkie. I'll raise them right. I'll teach them about you. I'll do all these things, as if I have the control and the power to dictate the course of their life. See where all these mistakes I'm making are coming up?
Like we all do. Yes.
Yeah. So in a very powerful way, he said to me, I sacrificed my son. Are you willing to sacrifice yours to glorify my kingdom? And I had to let go, not only of the control, but this ideology, this dream. You see, I hadn't realized that in my effort to love my kids well, I had become codependent and I idolized them. They were everything. And one thing that now looking back, I can see is anytime any idolized anyone or anything, anytime I inserted something between me and God, he removed it. Mm. So I'm on the floor. I'm wrestling with God. I don't understand why, but I said yes.
Wow.
And then I had this fearful reaction of like, okay, I guess, my kids will never know God. They'll never, and who's going to take care of them, right? And I don't know if you ever heard God laugh, but in my spirit, I heard him laugh. And he said, if you think that I'm going to forsake your kids because of your obedience, you don't know me at all.
That's good. Yes.
So every time I would visit or have my kids visit, I would see them. I did leave. I did walk away. I didn't walk away, but I did move. And it was reopening this wound every time. I talked to him on the phone and I just fall apart when we hung up. I would see them for our holidays and I would fall apart every time. And it just, for years, it was this continual, painful thing that I couldn't understand. And I just kept saying, my God, why wasn't I a good enough mom to keep my kids? What did I do wrong? Why did I get punished?
It goes,
and it took about
the blame. Yeah, the blame, right? We always blame ourselves. We always want to put it back onto ourselves. Yeah.
And this idea that God is a punisher, right? Like you have to somehow earn his favor, which we know, but we don't know. And so in that one of these times, in this moment, the last time that it really happened, he said to me in my spirit, Krystina, you were a good mom. You'd already done that. I needed you to level up to obedient daughter. And when that was reframed for me, it made all the difference in the world. It changed the way I saw that whole experience. And then he said, that part that you skip over, that's the part she needs to hear. Wow. He does some of his best work in shame.
For sure. And that's so true. And especially for women, right? Shame is can be such a stronghold. And when we hide, and that's exactly, where shame can grow, is we think we're alone. We think we're the only ones that have experienced this or that are feeling this way. And so then we stay hidden and that shame just grows and grows and grows. And it's like you said, until we are open and willing to share or to speak the truth, that's when the true freedom can come.
Yeah, absolutely. So what he walked me through was this process of trusting and surrendering and obeying. It's essentially asking, seeking, and knocking, same idea. But what was pointed out for me in my experience was there's a very human experience to following Christ. And the Bible, and I am not knocking the Bible. Please do not think I'm knocking the Bible. The Bible is about God. And it's like, okay, Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. And Abraham's like, cool, let's go. And Isaac was like, cool, let's go. And then, God did this great thing. The Bible's about God. It is his story. Like it should be that way. But what we miss is, I think that's how it was. Like there had to be some really human emotions that went along with that. And what the enemy does is says, you're not doing it right because you feel these things. You grieve. I grieved my obedience. I was like, I will be obedient, but this hurts and this sucks and it's painful. And I don't know if I can do this. And so that's where I really focus with women is the real human experience, because if you don't give yourself permission to be human in it, and believe me, God's got big hands, he's able to hold those parts of it, you will end up like Lot's wife. Because in my mind, the whole point of Lot's wife's story, I know we focus on don't look back. If we don't look back, we don't know how far God's brought us. But I think what that means is more a position of the heart. And it's this collision. God gave me a vision of her with this collision of grief. It was the grief of what she was giving up, but also the grief of what would never be. And it's the salt was like from her tears, like she was encased in this pillar of salt from her tears because she couldn't move forward. And to me, that is where the enemy steps in. Oh, you're sad because you're being obedient? Well, then you're not a good Christian. You're not doing it right. You should just stop. It shouldn't hurt. Like if God loved you, right? Like it wouldn't hurt. It'd all feel great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we start doing fear math and we start looking at the cost. Everything's the cost. But faith math is focused on value. And the beautiful thing is that all those things that we think we lose, the best parts of what we think we're losing get redeemed. He redeems it. We don't actually lose those things.
Mm-hmm.
But the enemy
You're
doesn't
right.
want us to know that.
That's right. So true. So how do you go from this traumatic childhood to marriage, divorce, to finally being at this place where you've healed, you're in a great marriage, you're happy, and now you're helping other people go through that same healing? Like it's incredible.
It is. It's a miracle. And I would love to tell you that I did something, but really he did something.
Yes,
And there's
absolutely.
nothing special. Like, I don't want people to think like, oh, it's just because that's the other thing I would do. I would be like, God's grace, yeah, he's got lots of it for you. Forgiveness, yeah, he's got lots of it for you.
Mm.
But I'm the exception to that. And he told me very clearly, I don't know how God talks to you. Sometimes he gives an attitude with me. And he said, you're not that special, Krystina.
Mm.
You're not. You're not the exception to the rule. You're not so broken that I can't use you.
Yeah, exactly.
So really, the short answer to your question is I really surrendered. I hated living the way I was more than I feared what I could be.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And that's the point that so often is where change happens, right? When we're sick and tired of being that version of sick and tired, whatever that is. And we're like, that's enough. I'm more afraid of that than I am of this. So I'm going to take the steps I need to get to out of this, whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for me, my kids were a large part of that because I was, coming off the second divorce, and I wanted to be a good mom. And I felt like I needed to make changes to be the best mom I could, especially in singlehood. And I was not a bad mom. I can say that. Like I was a good mom, but I wanted to make sure that the life my kids had was so much better than mine. I just didn't realize that all of my methods of doing that, all of my means of trying to control that was all preparing them from a place of protecting them from the trauma I had, not from the life that was meant for them.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of standing in the gap for my kids really, really motivated, like whatever it takes, it stops with me. This generational trauma stops with me.
Amazing.
So then I had to be like, what does that look like? And it really was the power of surrender cannot be overstated.
Yeah, exactly. That's so good. I mean, some takeaways from this already is don't let shame keep you stuck. Allow the truth to set you free, which is huge because it's so easy to get stuck in that. So don't let that happen. But then also making the steps you need to take to get you out of that, recognizing, which is scarier for me, to stay stuck here or the fear of making the steps, the fear of the unknown, really. But also allowing yourself to dream and think about what could be, what the future could look like. and then recognizing what is your motivator, right? You had your kids were helping motivate you and to become the best version of you so that you could also be the mom that you wanted to be, that you were, but also to just continue to grow and be even better.
And then the ironic part of that is then God stripped me of that
Yeah.
idol, not
Yeah.
identity, because I'm still a good mom. It's still part of who I am, but that idol was taken away from me. And it was very liberating and very freeing. It is so true. I think that we gloss over things like be still and know in the original text is surrender and know. But we live in this world where it's all about getting ahead. It's all about achievement, accomplishment, whether that's whatever that looks like, whether it's materialistic or relational, whatever it is for people. It's all about just do it, or have it your way. There's this illusion of control that we have. And when you are trying to control everything, you will be disappointed. You can't. We're not built for it. We're not God.
Right.
But we tend to worship at the altar of self and think that I am the one that needs to do this. If I don't keep this together, everybody will fall apart.
Come on. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. It's so easy to get stuck into that and think that all the burden is on your shoulders. You are the one that has to keep everything together. And we need to learn to lay that down and let go of that. Because we know we just mess things up when we're the one that's trying to control everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an image that God gave to me, and I like to share this one because for me, it was deeply impactful. But I had this image, and it was a woman, and we're all women here, so we can say this. It's a woman standing in front of a mirror. She's naked, and she is just picking herself apart, like we all do. Wrinkles, stretch marks, cellulite, chubbiness, whatever it may be, right? Whatever our thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And the enemy is sitting on the stool next to her going, yeah, ugh, disgusting. Oh, yeah, that's just the outside. What if people knew what you were like on the inside? Can you imagine? And then Jesus is in the room, and he's like, you're stunning. You are so beautiful. You're amazing. I love you. If that were me in that room, would I have the guts to tell Jesus he's wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no mention in the Bible. You cannot show me anywhere he was wrong.
Right.
So would I be brave enough to tell him that he's wrong about me? But yet, we come into agreement with the enemy every day. Every day we tell Jesus he's wrong.
Amazing illustration. I love that. That is so good. Yes. It's so easy
And
to get caught up in that.
it was really neat because the enemy said, who do you think you are? And in this vision, Jesus flipped it around and said, who do you think you are?
That's good. Exactly. Yes. And that's where where all the power truly is, where we know who we are, whose we are.
Yes.
Absolutely. Amazing, Krystina. So you coach people, you do this virtually. First off, tell us where everybody can find you.
So you can go to Linktree and find me, all the connections, but I'm also at breathelifecoaching.llc.com. It's a great way to reach me. I'm on Facebook under Breathe Life Coaching. You can email me at breathelifecoachingllc@gmail. Those are probably the three best ways. I am on YouTube, LinkedIn, all the socials. But the easiest, best way is to go to my website or email me.
Okay. Amazing. Such an interesting conversation. I feel like we barely brushed the surface, but this is so good. Krystina, if someone is listening today and they're feeling like I see myself where you were, or I have that shame, or I don't know how to move forward, what would you say to them? One practical thing they could start right now today to start to move their lives forward towards what they're desiring.
Well, one thing I want to tell you is you're not alone. This is not unique. This is not new. This is not something that God hasn't seen before. It's new to you, but not to him. And I think the first step is asking yourself, who told you that? Whatever it is you believe about yourself, who told you that? And it could be your parents, it could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a sibling, it could be a teacher, it could be a pastor. But if it doesn't go back to that it was God, like who told them that, if it doesn't go back to God, probably not true.
Right.
I think we have to remember that his breath is what fills our lungs. Like, so when we say things like, I am afraid, which by the way, the Bible says don't be afraid. It doesn't say don't be scared. Those are two different things.
Right.
Afraid is an identity. So
Yeah.
if it's I am afraid, when we follow anything, I am with anything, we need to ask, does that reflect the great I am? Because if
That's
not, it's probably not worthy of his breath.
amazing. That is so, I love that right there. If that is the takeaway from today, pay attention to what follows I am. Yes, because you're speaking that over yourself, over your identity, over your future. Absolutely. That is so good. Thank you for this. This has been a great conversation.
My pleasure.
Yes. Okay, Krystina, we just need to finish off with a few fast rapid fire questions just to help us get to know you a little bit better. Okay.
Okay.
Favorite healthy food?
I'm going to go with collard greens.
Nice.
Although
Do you
the way I
fry them
make them,
up?
I don't know if they still qualify as healthy.
Okay. Well, that's a good one, though. They're very, very nutritious. How about favorite place you've ever traveled to?
Favorite place I've ever, I love the mountains. So I would say probably the Grand Tetons or the Rocky Mountains, my favorite.
Amazing. Yes. And what's something that might surprise us to know about you?
I used to be a professional truck driver.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Would not expect that.
Nope.
Well, this has been awesome. Anything you want to just finish up with at all, Krystina, before we close it out today?
I just want to encourage women to not be afraid of reaching out for help. Oftentimes we'll invest hundreds or thousands of dollars into Christmas for kids or, special birthday extravaganzas for people, but we won't invest, $10 in us. And so I just really want to encourage women to reach out, get a community around you that supports you and breathes life over you and speaks life over you. I wrote a devotional trilogy. It is in order. There's 3 devotionals that walk you through some of this stuff we've talked about with trusting, surrendering, and obeying.
Awesome.
And I do blend neuroscience and neuroscientific tools into it. If you go to my website, there is a free assessment. It's called the Stronghold Spotlight. If you take that assessment and then you reach out to me and schedule a discovery call, that's free too. And I'm not pitching you anything. I'm not trying to get you to do coaching. All it is just a conversation about how these sabotaging behaviors might present themselves and be showing up in their life. And then we can decide what you want to do from there.
Sounds interesting. All right. Thank you for being here today, Krystina. This has been interesting. A great conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. May all the glory go to God.
Yes. All right. If this conversation has spoke to you today, make sure you let us know in the comments what was your biggest takeaway, and like and share it with someone else that you feel like might get some encouragement from this today, because we all want to design a life we love.